All right, so Dr. Birch here again. So now we're going to be going over part D of our procedure. So we're going to be using a burette to essentially do what we did in part B, where we measured out 10 milliliters of water and weighed it to determine what that volume of water was. We're going to be doing a similar type of thing, but we're going to be using what's known as a burette, which is this piece of glassware here. So it's used for measuring out volumes. So it's very accurate for measuring volumes because you'll notice these graduations along the line, each one is 0.1 of a milliliter is to the tenths place. So therefore we then estimate one digit past that, right, to the hundredths place. So every time we make a measurement with a burette, we have then 2 decimal places because we're estimating that last decimal place. Also, a burette's different because we're gonna fill it up. So up here at the top, it starts at 0, and then as we dispense the water, in this case, down through a burette, our numbers get bigger as we go down, right? So it starts at 0 at the top and works its way down to 50 at the very bottom, right? So when you're going to read the burette, you wanna make sure that you're reading it from the top down, right? So it's the reverse of a grad cylinder or a beaker or something like that, because they're basically reading it upside down. All right, so using your burette, the first thing we want to do, which is what step 1 tells us, is to clean our burette with water first, right? So we don't know what was in this burette before, right? So that's why we always want to rinse it out with whatever we're putting into it now, right? So we're using water, so I've got my beaker of water here. So I want to make sure that this stopcock is closed. So this is known as a stopcock. So when it's perpendicular to our burette, it is closed. But when it's parallel, it's open. So when it's open, the water will go through the burette, right? So when you're filling it, you want to make sure it's closed. Otherwise, as you pour it in, it's just going to come out the bottom, right? So you want to make sure that that's closed. I'll put it back into here just to pour some in. All right, so I use a funnel just to make it easy to pour some in. I'm just going to pour in about 10 milliliters or so, just estimating it. And then that gives me a way to then kind of rinse out the burette and rinse off anything that was in here. And because it's just water, I'm just going to pour it back into the sink. If it was anything else, we want to put it into a waste beaker. So we're going to do that one more time. So we're going to rinse it twice with our water. So again, just estimating about 10 milliliters or so. And so then that will be then our second rinse of our burette. So now that we've rinsed it out, we're going to put it back in this burette clamp. And now we can go through and we're going to fill up the burette. Right, so our instructions in step 2 tell us that we're going to make sure that the burette's closed, and then we're going to fill it up above the 0 mark, and then we're going to run out the excess and come back down below 0. So we'll just fill this up. And cool. So now we're above 0. It's behind this little piece of paper, but we're about 2 centimeters above 0. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a just waste beaker. So it's just a beaker I'm just going to run the water out into. So I'm going to open this up and let the water level come down below 0. 1, that's going to give our water level into somewhere we can measure it. And 2, right now there's air right here, but when we run water through, it's going to fill up with water, right? So it'll get rid of any air bubbles that we have down here. All right, so we're just going to run out about 10 milliliters or so, just to kind of get us down below. All right, so now we've gotten our level to somewhere we can measure it. We've rinsed out our burette in the bottom part. So that gets us through step 1 and 2. All right, so in step 3, we're going to read the initial volume of our pipette. All right, so remember that we always estimate 1 digit past what the instrument says, right? So each graduation is 1/10 of a milliliter. So you're going to read this then to 1 digit past that to the hundredths place. So you should have 2 decimal places in your reading, right? You want to make sure that you write that down as the volume initial into your data sheet. So now that we have our initial reading, we then are going to then put 10 milliliters into a beaker. But first, we want to weigh that beaker just like we did before. That way we can then weigh it again after it has water in it. So I'm going to take just a regular 50 ml beaker that's clean and dry, put it on our balance. You're going to record this weight as the mass of the empty beaker onto your data sheet. So now we've got the mass of the beaker empty, we've got the volume initial on our burette. So now we're going to add approximately 10 milliliters of water to this beaker, right? So you have your initial volume, which is approximately 10. So then I'm going to run it down to approximately 20 milliliters. That'll give us about 10 milliliters into our beaker. So I'm going to open up our stopcock and just let it run down. We're just getting approximately 10 milliliters. Doesn't have to be exactly. So then I'll go ahead and stop it here. And I'll slide this down a little bit, make it easier to read. So you're going to record this volume then as the final volume of the burette reading. Record that on to your data sheet. Be sure that you're reading the bottom of the meniscus. Again, estimating the hundredths place of the digit. All right, so once you've gotten that recorded, now we have the final volume. We have the initial volume. You can subtract those two values, and that'll then tell you the volume that you added into this beaker. So now we know the volume that's inside of our beaker. So now we're going to weigh it again with the water in it. So you'll record this mass as the weight of the beaker with the water inside of it. So be sure to record that onto your data sheet as well. So that's the mass of the beaker with water. You can then subtract the two masses, the empty beaker and the beaker with water, and then that tells you the mass of the water that we delivered into the beaker. And then again, you can use the density to calculate that volume. So this was then how we used our burette to then deliver approximately 10 mils of water into our beaker.